The primary purpose of SharePoint is to allow organizations to more effectively share and collaborate using common data. The exact type of data might be vastly different between various organizations. What a computer training company needs to store and work with will be different in many ways than what a manufacturing company needs to manage. If we can get beyond this idea, though, or at least trying to make everything different, it's always easier to focus on the commonalities rather than the differences. In SharePoint, that commonality is the list. Lists are like spreadsheets or database tables, if you're familiar with those. They're composed of fields of data that are arranged into rows and columns. Columns are, fortunately, just what they sound like. They are the vertical categories of data that's all the same, like transaction date or last name. The rows are called items in SharePoint. In database terminology, they're often called records. So you can have a record for the sale on March 1st and another record for the sale on June 11th. Each of those are records in a sales table or a sales list. This is the arrangement of lists, basically rows and columns. In our terminology, they are columns and items. Lists can be sorted, filtered, and manipulated to provide the data in a way that makes sense and is useful to us at the moment. The lists that will be in your SharePoint sites are going to depend on what you do, what you track, and who made your system. There are several common lists that you'll probably see fairly often. They can usually be seen from the quick launch bar on the right side of the page. You'll have things like a calendar and a task list. There could be any variety of lists here, though, and even though it might be a calendar or a task list, it might even be renamed. In our site, we actually have two task lists. One is still called Generic Tasks, but another has been renamed Curriculum Design Project. That way, it's a little more meaningful. Remember, though, that the way every single list functions is exactly the same, regardless of what name we have on it, regardless of what template was used to create it, or what type of data it stores. One thing to note is that in SharePoint 2013, they introduced a new development model that mimics what we're seeing in the rest of the world, primarily that what used to be lists and libraries are now also called apps. There are templates for lists and libraries, or what are now referred to as apps, and you can also download apps that have been predefined for you from the Microsoft Store. We aren't going to use any of those in this course, but I wanted to mention the new terminology and what it refers to. I'll continue to refer to them as lists and libraries. When a SharePoint site is created, it comes with a variety of lists and libraries that are included as part of the template. Those are usually the standard lists that I mentioned, like calendars and tasks. If you have administrator permissions, you can also add, edit, and delete lists and libraries from your site. We're going to use lists that are already in place. As we mentioned, we already have a couple of lists. Let's go ahead and start with the task list from the quick launch on the left side of the screen. This is a very simple list, and it only has a couple of entries. I wanted to keep it simple for us to get started. When a list or library opens, it opens to its default view. Every list has a default view. You can usually do most of what you want either from the ribbon options, which you'll notice at the top left-hand side of the screen, usually two tabs, one for working with items in the list and a second for working with the list itself. Or you can work using features that are on the main screen itself. You'll notice a variety of hyperlinks, and if you hover over different components, you'll see that most of them have some type of functionality by clicking or tapping on them. Let's try to keep things simple here for just a moment, so let's go ahead and go back to our Browse view and get rid of the ribbon. Now we can clearly see the name of the list at the top of the screen. We can also pause to see information about that list. There's a link right at the top that lets us add a new item or to edit the list. We'll get into that in just a few minutes. Below this entry, there are a set of links that let us change views to see all tasks, active tasks, or who they are assigned to. And again, we'll do an entire video on how to work with views. But all of this is right in front of us and simply requires a click or a tap. Now, if we get down to the main part of the screen, this is where we get into the list itself. In the standard view, which is what most of our lists will open to, we can see the names of our columns going across the top of the screen. Title, assigned to, status, and so forth. This list already has a couple of items, and we can see those listed below the column names. Proof course schedule, hire a new apps instructor. The first thing most of you will need to know how to do, though, is how to add a new item. And we're going to do that the simple way by simply using the new task link right at the top of the list. We could also do it from the Items tab in the ribbon. By clicking or tapping New Task, you'll see that the main screen kind of grays or dims. SharePoint thinks for a moment, and it opens something called a form. Everything that you create or edit in SharePoint will be done in some type of form. When you click the link, it opens the new form, and in this case, it's blank because we said new. If we would have said edit, it would have opened the form pre-populated with information from one of our list items. It's important to remember that regardless of the specific type of list or information that you're entering, you'll always enter data into form fields. And there are different types of form fields that I'm sure you've seen before. There are text fields where you simply just click and type. There are date fields where you can type in a date, or you can click to see a little drop-down calendar. There may be checkboxes, and there may be drop-down lists where you can either type things in, or you can select from a predefined list of options. The one field that I want to take just a moment to mention is the one here in this particular form called Assigned To. And you can see that it kind of looks like a text box. We could click and type into it, but it has some text. It says, enter a name or email address. This is a special kind of field. In prior versions of SharePoint, it was called a people picker, and actually it still is, but it looks a little bit different now. In the old days, what you would see over to the right-hand side were two little icons. One was a little face, and the other was a book. That would let you check names if you type them in manually or use the address book to find them. They've kind of modified the functionality a little bit, made it easier to work with on mobile apps and simplified it. And what you will find now is that if you click into one of these people picker fields and start typing a name, once you start getting to unique combinations, SharePoint will actually provide a list for all of the people it recognizes. This is going to be the people who have access to SharePoint, which primarily is going to be your coworkers and colleagues. All you need to do is click or tap to select the name. This is important because what it means is you haven't just designated a name as a bunch of text, you've entered something that SharePoint recognizes as a user, and that has functionality behind it. Because of the way SharePoint works, with things like Outlook, Exchange, meaning your email and your Active Directory, it now knows that this is a person. And SharePoint has, among other things, the capability to notify the person or send them emails. If you would have just typed a name into a text box, that functionality wouldn't be there. That's what the People Picker does. It ties the name that you select to an actual account on the system with which it can do different things, like sending messages. You could go ahead and enter as many names as you wanted, or if you want to delete somebody, you can simply click on the X. I just wanted to point out how the People Picker field is a little bit different than your standard date and drop-down and text fields. Everything else, though, is pretty much like filling out a form has always been online. You do whatever it is you need to do to get the information in the way that you need and try to be as complete as possible. Also notice that required fields do have an asterisk next to them, letting you know that those are required and must be filled in. Everything else, technically, is optional. So let's go ahead and just fill in this task name. Let's say that we need Aaron to do something, and what we need Aaron to do is to review the training schedule. I'm not going to worry too much about putting in start dates and due dates, but of course you can see that it's very easy to do by using the calendar options. You can either type in values or you can select them from the calendar. So we reviewed a little bit about all of these different columns or fields that we're going to fill in and how the different fields work. But did you notice that there's a ribbon at the top of this form? This has some of the common buttons you'd expect. There's a clipboard group so you can cut, copy, and paste data and not necessarily have to retype everything. There may be an option to attach a file if this type of list allows attachments. And one of my favorites, there's also a spell check. Everybody needs to run a spell check because remember, this is information you're putting out for your entire organization or at least your team to see. So why not give it a click and take a couple of seconds to make sure that everything is spelled correctly? Maybe more importantly is eventually you either need to cancel out of this form or you need to save it. And those two buttons are on the top left-hand corner. There's also the option to save and cancel at the bottom of the form. So for longer forms, you can do it either from the top or from the bottom, whichever is more convenient for you. So once you get your form filled out with whatever information that may require, you're going to click or tap Save. That's going to close the form that's been sitting in the front of our screen and make our main screen active again. You should then be able to see the new item that has been added to the list. You will also notice that these items have a variety of different functionality if you pause over them. For example, Every single one of these items will usually have a check mark at the beginning. If you want to physically select an item, usually so you can use the ribbon to work with it, you simply click or tap on the check mark. You can see now that that's highlighted and selected. If you pause over one of the fields in a list item, and usually it's going to be the title or the name, you'll notice that it's a hyperlink. If you click or tap on this link, it will open the item in read mode. This looks almost identical to what we were working with before, at least as far as the columns of information that we see, but notice we can't edit them here. Clicking on the link opens it in read mode, which means you can read the information. And if you wanted to edit it, you could click or tap the edit option from the top left side of the form. If you just wanted to view it, you could view it and then use the close button when you're done. That's one way to view and edit an item, but to me that's almost too many clicks. I actually prefer to move over to the right. This is called the Open menu. Now it used to look like a little drop-down arrow, and now they've changed it to the 3 dots or the ellipsis. When you click or tap on this Open menu, it gives you choices for working with this particular item. You can view the item, edit the item, work with workflows, you can be alerted about the item, you can work with sharing, and you can even delete the item. The most commonly used options would be to view, open, or delete, but you may also see these other options as well. It's important to remember as you start looking through lists and working with things like the Open menu and even the ribbon, that what you see and what is available for you will depend on your permissions. You won't see any items you don't have at least read permissions for in the list itself. And if you do have read permissions but nothing else, you won't see options like editing and deleting. If I only had read permissions on this list, I would never see an option to be able to delete an item because that's not something I'm allowed to do. This is the security trimmed interface at work again. I know sometimes it's hard to figure out, but it actually does simplify our use of SharePoint because as a user, you'll only see the options that you can actually use. Now, we've opened up our item in read mode and shown you how to get into edit mode. Using the Open menu, we could also open it directly in edit mode and kind of bypass the 2-step process. All of these are available right from working on the main part of the screen in the main list. I don't ever want you to claim that I didn't try to show you everything though, so let's talk about using the ribbon. We can do the exact same things from the ribbon that we can using the main screen. In order to use the ribbon, you do need to select first, so make sure that little check mark is highlighted. Then you can go up, in this case, to the Items tab. By displaying the ribbon, we see basically all of the same options that we had from within the screen itself. We can create a new item, we can view the item, we can edit an item. If we have permissions, we can also do things like deleting the item. We can attach a file, we can create an alert, and we can work with various other pieces of functionality that we'll be talking about as we work through this series. I'll say it here and probably a couple more times, but it does not matter at all to me whether you use the ribbon or you use the main screen. They all do the same thing. It's just personal preference. But assuming that you have the proper permissions, these are the ways that you can add, edit, and work with list items. What you now know is that although the data they store may be very different, all lists are the same. They're made up of fields or columns and views. All items are created either through links on the page or ribbon options. All list items are created and edited on forms. Forms allow you to use the clipboard and run a spell check. Required columns on forms are going to be denoted by a blue asterisk, making them very easy to identify. Some lists will allow you to make attachments to the list items, and you can do that using the ribbon in the form. And you can do that using the ribbon. Once created, items can be viewed and edited using options from the Open menu or the ribbon. The options that are available to you will depend on the permissions that you have for the list and/or the specific list item.